Train just stopped and all the migrants are really nervous.
It's a cartel civil war that's seen migrants targeted for kidnap and ransom.
Te agarra y te viola, te mata, te hace de todo.
Known as the Beast, the freight service which passes through here has for years been used by migrants to hitch a ride north. For Pancho and his family, it's the latest stage in their journey from Venezuela.
Yo pensaba que anoche iba a llegar gente, yo llegué anoche acá, yo pensaba que iba a llegar gente y no llegó nada, no llegó nadie. La gente tiene temor a subir, pero es por los carteles.
The cartel's violence has hit a whole new level. Brutal murders, chaos, and destruction are everywhere, but their latest moves are even worse than you'd think. Now, they're turning migrant routes into deadly killing zones. Warning, viewer discretion is advised. What you're about to see is disturbing.
Pancho and his wife Diana have escaped the cartels once before, but only after they threatened to rape his daughter. Now he carries a knife in case they meet again.
Lately, the migrant crisis at the US-Mexico border has spiraled into a haunting new reality. We're not just talking about people crossing the border. This is an all-out catastrophe, with thousands of lives hanging by a thread. Driven from their homes by violence, poverty, and corrupt governments, migrants are risking everything in search of a future in the US. But the journey they're undertaking isn't a hopeful path. It's a nightmare that tests every ounce of their will to survive.
In the station, they meet Josué, another Venezuelan joining them on the train.
Depende de lo que podamos disponer, llegamos a Chihuahua o a Monterrey.
He cycled 450 kilometers to get here, a journey of optimism and desperation.
¿Y qué llevas acá, hermano?
La esperanza, brother. Dejé toda mi familia allá. Toda la fe está conmigo. Toda la fe de mi familia. Ya con eso ya da, basta y sobra.
¿Tienes harto peso?
No, el peso es ligero, si Dios está conmigo.
Across Latin America, people are fleeing in droves from countries like Venezuela, Honduras, and Guatemala. They're escaping crushing poverty, brutal gang violence, and failing governments that have left them in hopeless situations. They're willing to risk the unknown dangers of a grueling journey through Mexico, holding on to the slim hope of safety in the United States. But the reality they face is nothing short of harrowing. This is no peaceful march to freedom. It's a test of endurance through one of the most ruthless, unforgiving landscapes controlled by brutal forces that see them only as pawns for profit.
But as the evening comes, the fear creeps back. It's harder to see when danger is coming, and if the train stops, we are an easy target. No one knows that better than Diana, kidnapped once before.
Yo pasé eso y sé cómo es y no quiero vivirlo otra vez, no quiero que otra persona viva lo que yo viví.
For these migrants, every step forward means plunging deeper into cartel territory. The Mexican drug cartels have seized control over nearly all migrant routes, viewing these desperate people as nothing more than easy prey. To the cartels, migrants are walking wallets, bodies to be sold, and pawns for profit. The violence and cruelty inflicted on them is beyond imagination.
Human smuggling has developed to an industrial scale. Illegal immigrants in the hands of professional smugglers find themselves trapped in a system of cruelty, neglect, and death.
Cartel's takeover of migrant routes. The brutal cartel takeover of migrant routes is a shocking transformation. Once focused almost solely on drug trafficking, Mexican cartels have pivoted to trafficking as a new, profitable enterprise. The Sinaloa Cartel, CJNG, and others now control nearly every main migration path through Mexico, creating an endless cycle of fear and exploitation. For migrants, it means navigating a gauntlet of cartel checkpoints and tolls, where their lives and freedom are gambled at every crossing. A wrong turn could mean facing horrors worse than they fled from. Not too long ago, Mexican cartels were known mainly for trafficking drugs across borders, but in recent years, their grip on human trafficking has tightened, making it another dark source of income. Now, nearly all migration routes through Mexico are dominated by the cartel. migrants find themselves at the mercy of ruthless cartel members, forced to navigate an unseen war zone filled with horrors.
The United States southwest border is in the midst of an unrelenting wave of migration. Many fleeing poverty, or violence, or wars, or climate change. It's all here. But this story is about the how. How millions of people are arriving so quickly, so efficiently. And that answer is simpler. It's organized crime.
Criminal organizations like the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel have become a dark, shadow government, imposing their brutal authority in towns across Mexico. They enforce control over migration paths, making anyone attempting to pass pay a steep, sometimes deadly price. For the cartels, every migrant represents the opportunity for money, leverage, and power. To them, it's a twisted game of control where lives are simply commodities to be traded.
Like this Honduran woman and her family who preferred to remain nameless for fear of retaliations. They were held for 3 days in a structure filled with other abducted migrants known as the Chicken Coop until they could pay $100 each in ransom.
We crossed the river, then several men approached on motorcycles. They took us. They asked us what we were doing, that we were foreigners and not supposed to be there. They demanded money. Today my brother was able to do a wire transfer. We paid them and they let us go.
Checkpoints are set up like toll booths, but instead of road fees, these tolls are paid in cash, freedom, or life itself. Migrants who can't pay are captured, and their families back home are hit with ransom demands they often can't afford. Those who fail to meet the cartel's price face a terrifying consequence, whether that means forced labor, brutal violence, or death.
The criminals stamped their skin to signal they had paid. The kids were marked too.
They said, take off your shirt, and they stamped us. They say that it's their seal. And once you're stamped, anyone who checks us would not hurt us because they control the area. They say that if you're not stamped and other people catch you, you have to pay again.
Many other families repeated the same story in the shelter, but all were too scared to talk on camera.
This journey isn't just dangerous, it's a battleground of despair. Migrants are beaten, robbed, and forced into cartel schemes. Some are even made to work as mules, while others are thrown into makeshift prisons, their fate tied to a ransom payment that may never come. Even then, a paid ransom doesn't guarantee freedom. The cartels hold every card, and they're not above breaking even the cruelest of deals.
Finally, they get their chance. The train arrives and begins to slow down at the signal point. The migrants rush for whatever space they can get. Families stuck into the gaps between carriages. Every second counts. They don't know how long the train will stay for.
The La Bestia train. The La Bestia freight train is infamous among migrants as both a lifeline and a death trap. Thousands cling to its sides, enduring its deadly route through cartel territory. Falling off means certain death or serious injury, but the dangers of the train itself pale in comparison to the horrors that lurk along the route.
Josué gets his bike on board and then offers a hand to those running out of time. Traveling on the beast can take weeks because migrants have no idea where it will stop or for how long. Hundreds have died or lost limbs after falling off.
Riding the beast is a terrifying gamble. Cartels control the route, and they have the power to stop the train whenever they please. When they do, migrants are pulled off, robbed, and taken hostage. It's a horrifying experience, and for many migrants, it's just one of many dangers they face along the way.
The men keep watch on top of the train, where one wrong move can throw them off.
No, migración no. Migración lo que uno que puedes hacer, agarrarte y bajarte para Tapachula, por allá abajo te llega otra vez. En cambio las otras personas te agarran y te violan, te matan, te hacen de todo. De ahí no te salvan ni mi Dios.
The cartels are ruthless, and they don't care about the lives they destroy. To them, every migrant is just another chance to make money. Many of these migrants left their home countries because of violence, only to find even more violence on the journey north.
This train used to be packed with migrants traveling up north, but nowadays just a few of them traveling in between the carriages and on top of the train.
As the train continues, we enter cartel territory and it begins to slow down.
The train just stopped and all the migrants are really nervous because we're in the middle of nowhere. They fear we could be kidnapped.
Ghost towns. In border towns like Ciudad Juarez, what once thrived with life now exists under a dark cloud of fear. These towns, emptied by cartel brutality, are ghostly reminders of what the cartels have taken. For locals, speaking out or even stepping outside can mean death.
In my view, is the most dangerous city on earth right now.
Migrants who make it into these cartel-controlled towns often face impossible choices. Some are forced to pay outrageous fees to move forward. Others are kidnapped and held for ransom, with cartels contacting their families back home to demand payment. The families who receive these calls often have no way of paying, leaving their loved ones trapped with no clear way out.
But some are still risking the journey, and it's not just governments they are dodging.
The train just stopped and all the migrants are really nervous.
It's a cartel civil war that's seen migrants targeted for kidnap and ransom.
The sheer power that these cartels hold over the borderlands is unimaginable. They are organized, well-armed, and operate with no fear of law enforcement. Even Mexico's National Guard struggles to control these groups, as the cartels are often more powerful. The towns near the border are haunted by the constant presence of cartel members, and for migrants, it means one more obstacle to reaching safety.
Mexico's government likes to highlight its success in stemming the flow of migrants, but what everyone here will tell you, albeit in a whisper, is that it's organized crime that controls who moves here, while the authorities turn a blind eye to it.
The shifting U.S. policies. For migrants, the path to the U.S. is also worsened by policy shifts that feel like ticking time bombs. Trying to cross before the rules change again, many are pushed into deadlier routes by laws meant to deter them, but that only expose them to even more peril.
Tonight, as thousands of migrants pursue their treacherous journey north, new dangers emerging at every turn. In central Mexico, a 5-year-old girl from Colombia losing her leg when she tried to board a moving train with her family and fell beneath one of its cars. Migrants who've been walking for days and weeks seen here desperately clinging on top of speeding trains, finding any means possible to carry on the perilous trek.
A humanitarian crisis. The situation is no longer just a crisis. It's a full-blown humanitarian catastrophe. Aid groups are overwhelmed, and even humanitarian workers risk cartel violence for simply trying to help. It's a harrowing situation that, without major intervention, only spirals deeper into darkness each day.
Tuve la niña ahí porque en el Dariel porque no, o sea, no contaba con los recursos para hacerme una ecografía en Venezuela, ya que vale $40. Y me vine así, no me había hecho ecos, no me había hecho exámenes, nada. Pensaba que todavía no la iba a tener. Fuerte porque ya después que la tuve uno tiene que caminar así, que es doloroso.
Migrants trapped. For the people caught in this crisis, every day is a struggle between life and death. Many fled to escape horrors at home, only to find themselves caught between one nightmare and another. And while some make it across, countless others remain ensnared in the cartel's brutal grip, their suffering unseen by the outside world.
During the previous administration, there was violence against the migrants, but it was hidden, not now. Now, they do it in front of everyone, for everyone to see. The kidnappers' trucks park in front of the municipality and take the migrants away. The municipal police, the National Guard, and all the authorities know what's happening. They are colluding with organized crime.
A terrifying prospect for thousands of migrants fleeing mayhem at home just to become a commodity in an increasingly violent trade.
If you've been following the border crisis for the last several years, you already know this isn't a new story. In fact, this crisis has only deepened over time, Despite countless political promises to bring it to an end, leaders have been declaring for years that they'll fix the border. Yet here we are, with the situation worse than ever. The cartels have tightened their grip, the routes have grown deadlier, and the numbers of migrants making this desperate journey continue to soar. During his previous term, former President Donald Trump vowed to get tough on the cartels and stop illegal immigration. His approach was centered around policies like building a border wall, increasing deportations, and pressuring Mexico to step up its enforcement. And now, as Trump returns to the political spotlight, he's once again promising to take action to end the crisis. But with cartel power at an all-time high and the demand for immigration reform more urgent than ever, many wonder if these promises will really make a difference.
The Mexican border might just decide the US election. Images of migrants crossing over is driving support for Donald Trump.
When I win on November 5th, the migrant invasion ends.
Conclusion. The current migrant crisis in the US-Mexico border is a dark, disturbing reality, a chaotic situation that spiraled far beyond simple border control. The cartels have turned these migrant routes into perilous death traps, and as long as they remain in power and policies keep shifting, the crisis will keep going on and on. Have thoughts on the horrifying migrant crisis? Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're wanting more, check out the next recommended video on your screen.
All right, get this. Federal authorities in El Paso relinquishing custody of a man linked to this violent jewelry robbery.
Venezuelan security forces have killed hundreds in what could count as extrajudicial executions, according to the United Nations.
Yeah, this is all footage from the US, but in front of the camera, there's always the same people. Venezuelan soldiers from the Tren de Aragua gang. Venezuela was once a prosperous nation with the world's largest oil reserves and stunning natural beauty. Now, it has descended into a state of profound crisis. Money is just about as valuable as monopoly cash now, and most people can't afford even basic healthcare or groceries. At the center of this crisis lies the notorious gang Tren de Aragua and a corrupt president who denies the existence of the gang.
What do you think about what's going on in Venezuela? The whole situation out there.
Well, I know it very well, and Venezuela is right now being run by a dictator.
Now, Tren de Aragua's influence has grown to alarming proportions, even reaching the shores of the US, and people are worried, perhaps rightfully so. Let's explore the latest chaos and see the brutal tactics that Texas has just employed in making sure this gang is reduced to ashes. These were former President Trump's words when asked about the current situation in Venezuela.
What do you think about what's going on in Venezuela? The whole situation out there.
Well, I know it very well, and Venezuela is right now being run by a dictator. We were enemies with Venezuela. Venezuela was going to collapse. People could have gone back to Venezuela. They're in our country now. They've released tremendous numbers of criminals into our country.
Now, you might disagree with some, or many, of his claims. Migrants are rarely bad people. We all have a right to move to other countries looking for a better life, and most migrants coming from south of the US into the US want nothing more than that. However, along with many Venezuelans running from the Tren de Aragua came Tren de Aragua itself over the Mexican border into states like Texas and Arizona. But you see, the current crisis goes way back for this once beautiful country. A turbulent political landscape and economic mismanagement mark Venezuela's journey to its current state of crisis. The country's reliance on oil exports as its primary source of revenue left it vulnerable to the volatility of global oil prices. When Hugo Chavez came to power in 1999, after a failed coup d'etat in 1992 and a short prison stint, he implemented his Bolivarian Revolution, which initially saw improvements in poverty rates and access to education and healthcare.
Ahora estamos viendo, como se preveía, los efectos del tratamiento, todo el cuerpo, y el hecho de la caída del cabello en el tratamiento de quimioterapia, bueno, es normal, y además indica que el tratamiento está siendo está siendo, digamos, efectivo de manera genérica. Es además my new look. How are you? Bien. Es un new look.
However, his policies of nationalization and price controls, coupled with corruption and mismanagement, set the stage for the country's economic downfall. Following Chávez's death, in 2013, his chosen successor, Nicolás Maduro, took office. Under Maduro's leadership, the situation in Venezuela rapidly deteriorated. The collapse of oil prices in 2014 exposed the fragility of the country's economy, leading to hyperinflation, widespread shortages of basic goods and medicines, and a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented proportions. Amidst this chaos, criminal organizations found fertile ground to expand their operations. The most notorious among these is the Tren de Aragua, a gang that has risen to prominence in recent years.
There's already about 8 million Venezuelans that have fled the country since 2015 or 2016. Another 40% who are still in the country wanting to flee, that could be another 10 million people. This would be almost 20 million people, more than half the country.
Yeah, that's how bad it is. More than half the country wanting to get the hell out of Dodge. And that's because of the marriage made in hell between Nicolás Maduro and Tren de Aragua.
Hay pánico en Venezuela. Las advertencias hechas por los grupos ilegales como el Tren del Llano, el Tren de Aragua y otros se empezaron a cumplir en protesta contra el fraude electoral de Nicolás Maduro. Durante las últimas horas en el estado de Guárico se han escuchado continuos tiroteos y la orden de alias Oscar del Llano es reclutar y dar armas. Algunas zonas de ese estado parecen barrios fantasmas. Alex Oyola.
Tren de Aragua originated as a prison gang in the state of Aragua, Venezuela. Taking advantage of the country's deteriorating security situation and weakening institutions, the gang rapidly expanded its influence beyond prison walls. Their activities span a wide range of criminal enterprises, including drug trafficking, extortion, kidnapping, and human smuggling. The gang's name, which translates to Aragua Train, is believed to reference the railway line that runs through Aragua State. This imagery of a train network aptly describes how the gang has spread its influence across Venezuela and beyond its borders. Tren de Aragua's growth has been meteoric. From its humble beginnings in the Tocaron prison, the gang has evolved into a transnational criminal organization with a presence in multiple countries across South America. Their influence extends into Colombia, Peru, Chile, and even as far as the United States. The gang's modus operandi involves infiltrating migrant routes, exploiting vulnerable populations fleeing Venezuela's crisis. They have been known to force migrants into criminal activities, using threats and violence to ensure compliance. This has led to a complex intertwining of the migrant crisis and criminal activities, further complicating the regional response to Venezuela's exodus. The rise of Tren de Aragua has had a devastating impact on Venezuelan society. In areas where they operate, the gang has effectively replaced state authority, implementing their own brutal form of justice. Extortion has become commonplace, with businesses and individuals forced to pay protection money to avoid violence.
En menos de una semana, Venezuela se ha sumido no solo en los brotes de violencia en la calle, sino parálisis temporal de transporte urbano y el suministro de combustible. Las autoridades también acusan a los mismos que destaparon el fraude electoral de culpables.
Wait, did he just say electoral fraud? Yeah, about that. Nicolás Maduro's been running Venezuela like it's his personal monopoly game, changing the rules whenever he's losing. He's shut down anyone who dares to speak against him, turning the country into his own little dictatorship playground. But here's where it gets weird. His iron fist approach has actually helped Tren de Aragua flourish. How does that work? Well, as Maduro weakened the police and courts, Tren de Aragua swooped in like vultures, taking over entire neighborhoods. And it goes the other way around too. Maduro's actually benefiting from their reign of terror. See, Maduro uses the fear created by Tren de Aragua to justify his harsh policies. He's like, look how dangerous things are. You need me to protect you. Meanwhile, the gang is thriving in the chaos Maduro has created. It's like they're feeding off each other's awfulness. This twisted partnership came into the spotlight during the July 28, 2024 presidential election. Maduro claimed he won with 51% of the vote, but pretty much everyone else called BS. The opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, said the election was rigged. And guess who was spotted intimidating voters? Yep, Tren de Aragua members. So now Venezuela's stuck in this nasty loop. Maduro's dictatorship creates perfect conditions for Tren de Aragua to grow, and the gang's violence gives Maduro excuses to tighten his grip even more. It's like a never-ending cycle of corruption and crime, with regular Venezuelans caught in the middle. The gang's activities have contributed significantly to the country's skyrocketing crime rates. Kidnappings, once rare in Venezuela, have become increasingly common. The fear instilled by Tren de Aragua and other criminal groups has destroyed the quality of life for ordinary Venezuelans, already struggling with economic hardship and political instability. The influence of Tren de Aragua has not been confined to Venezuela's borders, as the Venezuelan crisis has spurred a mass exodus of migrants. The gang has exploited this movement to expand its operations internationally.
They are going through the complex, like I am told that they are, heavily armed. They patrol the complex. They control who comes in, who goes out. They go from door to door. They have forced their way into many complexes. They have thrown people out.
Recent reports indicate that Tren de Aragua has established a strong presence in the United States, raising significant concerns among law enforcement agencies. The gang's members are believed to have entered the country by blending in with the influx of Venezuelan migrants seeking asylum. You can only imagine what this does to the already divided political discourse in the U.S. In the U.S., Tren de Aragua has been linked to a variety of criminal activities, including drug trafficking, human smuggling, and violent crimes.
Maybe even a deadly threat facing both our state as well as our country is the recent entry and expansion of the vicious Venezuelan gang known as Tren de Aragua.
Their presence has been noted in several states, including Florida, New York, and Texas.
All right, get this. Federal authorities in El Paso relinquishing custody of a man linked to this violent jewelry robbery. This happened back in June in Denver. So our partners at News Nation, they're reporting it's part of a Venezuelan gang.
The growing threat posed by Tren de Aragua has led to calls for stronger action against the gang. In a significant move, the state of Texas has designated Tren de Aragua as a terrorist organization. This designation allows for enhanced law enforcement measures and stricter penalties for individuals associated with the gang. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas announced this designation. During his press conference, Abbott noted that more than 100 TDA members had been arrested at the Gateway Hotel in downtown El Paso on charges including human smuggling and possession of illegal drugs. Some media reports described it as a takeover of the hotel by the gang. Michael Shifter from Inter-American Dialogue explained, "It is clearly a major problem that needs to be dealt with. I think there's reason to be confident that U.S. law enforcement can handle it. This move reflects the growing concern about the gang's activities and its potential to destabilize communities in the United States." The issue of Tren de Aragua and Venezuelan migration has become a hot-button political topic in the United States. Former President Donald Trump has made strong statements about the situation, claiming that Venezuela is emptying their prisons into the U.S. While these claims have been disputed by fact-checkers, they highlight the politicization of the issue and its potential impact on U.S. foreign policy and immigration debates.
They've released tremendous numbers of criminals into our country. If you look at Caracas, it's known for being a very dangerous city, and now it's very safe.
Trump went as far as saying this about Venezuelans. They're drug dealers, they're criminals, they're murderers, they're rapists. Everything's been moved into the United States. Yeah, it doesn't take much knowledge to realize not all Venezuelans are so, and it's not cool to talk like that about an entire nation. And as Michael Shifter pointed out, it might not be a coincidence that Abbott named Tren de Aragua a terrorist organization right before the elections. Indeed, but whatever your stance on the elections, the reality of Tren de Aragua is an increasingly violent one, and many law enforcement agencies in the U.S. can no longer ignore it. Texas has taken a particularly aggressive stance against Tren de Aragua, reflecting the state's concerns about border security and transnational crime. The designation of the gang as a terrorist organization is just one part of a broader strategy to combat their influence.
Expansion and entry of this gang could destabilize public safety in the United States as well as in the state of Texas.
Texas has implemented several measures to target Tren de Aragua. The state has bolstered its presence along the border with Mexico, aiming to intercept gang members attempting to enter the country. Law enforcement agencies have created dedicated units to focus on Tren de Aragua's activities within the state. Texas has also intensified efforts to collect and analyze intelligence about the gang's operations, working in collaboration with federal agencies and international partners. Recognizing that many Venezuelan migrants are themselves victims of Tren de Aragua, Texas has initiated programs to build trust with migrant communities and encourage reporting of gang activities.
Together, they will seek to identify and arrest TDA gang members.
The terrorist designation carries significant legal implications. Individuals found to be associated with Tren de Aragua now face more severe criminal charges and longer prison sentences. The designation allows for easier confiscation of assets believed to be linked to the gang's activities. Law enforcement can now employ more invasive investigative techniques when dealing with suspected Tren de Aragua members.
TDA gangsters are like cockroaches. They multiply quickly. Small intrusions into communities become infestations if not aggressively pursued.
Clearly, the Tren de Aragua problem isn't just giving Venezuela headaches, it's causing migraines for US policymakers too. Think of it as adding ghost peppers to an already spicy dish of US-Venezuela relations. Here's the deal. The US has slapped sanctions on Venezuela, hoping to pressure the Maduro government into behaving. But some folks are wondering if these sanctions are backfiring, creating a perfect storm for gangs like Tren de Aragua to thrive. And it doesn't stop there. With Tren de Aragua members sneaking into the US, the immigration debate has reached a whole new level of heated. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. How do you protect asylum seekers while keeping the bad guys out? Despite the frosty relationship between the US and Venezuela, there's a growing chorus calling for the two countries to team up against Tren de Aragua. It's a bit like asking sworn enemies to work together on a group project. Awkward, but necessary. However, Venezuela's government poses a real problem. Their approach to Tren de Aragua has been inconsistent, to say the least. A few times, Maduro literally denied their existence. Other times, his government pointed fingers at the political opposition, accusing them of being in cahoots with the gang. Meanwhile, the government's already infamous corruption is like a fortress protecting Tren de Aragua from any real harm.
They're running away from a situation that was impossible to stay in.
As millions of Venezuelans flee their crumbling country, Tren de Aragua has spotted an opportunity. They've turned migration routes into their personal toll roads, extorting desperate people and sometimes forcing them into criminal activities. But it gets worse. The gang has also become a major player in human trafficking, preying on people's dreams of a better life. And as Venezuelan migrants spread across South America, so does Tren de Aragua's network. It's like they're franchising their criminal empire. Texas has already shown their stance on the gang, and it's most likely going to get even more violent from here on out. There's only one way to treat designated terrorist groups, but law enforcement agencies across the Americas need to work together like a well-oiled machine. We're talking about upgrading tech, sharing intel, and coordinating operations. But even the best crime fighting won't fix the root of the problem. Venezuela needs to get its economy back on track and rebuild its institutions. Creating jobs, strengthening the justice system, and giving young people alternatives to a life of crime are crucial. At its core, solving the Tren de Aragua problem means fixing Venezuela's political crisis. That means finding a way back to real democracy. Easier said than done. The trick is balancing tough security measures with protecting human rights. After all, many of the people caught up in this mess are victims, not villains. The Tren de Aragua story is like a cautionary tale come to life. It shows how quickly things can spiral out of control when a country falls apart. But it also highlights how interconnected our world really is. What happens in Venezuela doesn't stay in Venezuela. It spills over borders, affects policies in far-off countries, and challenges the international community to step up. As the situation evolves, the world faces a daunting task, containing Tren de Aragua while also helping Venezuela get back on its feet. It's a tall order, but one that requires our attention and action. After all, in today's global village, we're all in this together. Hey, thanks for tuning in. What are your thoughts on the current situation and on Texas's decision to name the TDN a terrorist organization? What do you think is next? leave a comment, and before you leave, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. All right, catch you soon.